This is the story of how rejection led to destiny, and how the one they cast out returned to be crowned. Before the triumphant return, before the ultimate reckoning, there was the moment her world shattered. After risking everything for the beta she loved, Elara's heart was ripped from her chest when Rexus publicly denounced their bond to secure his title. He called her a mistake of scent, stripped her of her home, and left her to die in the treacherous Grimwood forest. But the moon goddess, Lyra, had a different plan for the gentle healer. She never makes a mistake, she only delays the truth. Get ready, pack, because this is the legend of the Luna who refused to be erased. And hey, if you're as ready for this story as I am, smash that like button and subscribe. And trust me, you won't want to miss Elara's journey from Broken Omega to Shadow Pack Queen. The Great Hall of Azure Peak howled with celebration as Beta Rexus raised his silver goblet to the cheering crowd, but before he could drink, the immense oak doors splintered open with a crash like a glacier breaking. A blast of frigid air rushed through the chamber, extinguishing every torch and stealing the breath of every wolf assembled. All eyes turned. She stood there. Elara, the Omega healer he had once coldly dismissed, now draped in shimmering silver and shadow-black velvet, her demeanor calm, her power radiating undeniably. By her side stood two young men, reflections of each other with intense amber-green eyes that seemed to burn with the light of the full moon. The crowd inhaled sharply. Even the massive crystal chandeliers seemed to dim in terror. Beta Rexus. Elara's voice carried across the marble floor a low, soft tone that was sharp enough to pierce steel. You extended an invitation to your celebration. I felt it rude not to bring company. Rexus's triumphant smile dissolved. Why you shouldn't be here. You're banned. On the contrary, she countered, stepping forward, her gait steady. I belong everywhere the moon shines. The twins, in perfect synchronization, raised matching pendants, one etched with the feral Shadow Paw sigil, the other with the azure crest symbol. The hall became utterly silent. Then, a gasp of recognition rose from a nearby alpha. True alpha blood. Rexus's goblet slipped from his hand, the crimson wine splattering across the polished marble like freshly spilled blood. Impossible, he rasped, his eyes darting between Elara and the boys. Elara offered a slow, devastating, radiant smile. The moon never makes mistakes, Rexus. She simply waits for the right moment. Above them, the grand skylight suddenly flared with brilliant silver fire as the entire pack knelt, not to the beta, but under the sheer weight of divine light. The woman he had broken stood crowned in glory, her sons glowing beside her, living proof that an attempt at rejection cannot, and will not, rewrite fate. As the beta's world collapsed around him, she turned away, her whisper echoing through the silence left behind. You tried to erase me, Rexus, but you only made me the story. Chapter 1. The forest surrounding the Azure Peak summit was a symphony of sound. Wolves howled from the distant mountain ridges, their cries echoing through the night like ancient hymns sung to the moon goddess. The grand beta trials had reached their zenith, and Azure Peak's hallowed arena glittered under the pale, sacred glow of a perfectly full moon. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my heart thundering like a trapped drum, my palms damp with fear and hope. My eyes were fixed on Rexus as he moved with lightning speed through the gauntlet. Every muscle on his body was sculpted with dominant purpose. Every strike of his claws was precise, every victorious snarl an echo of sheer dominance. He was undeniably winning, and in a strange, secret way, I had helped him achieve it. Just days earlier, I had risked my standing in the pack, venturing out to gather forbidden nightbloom root to heal his deep wounds after a brutal, nearly fatal spar. The powerful herb burned my hands, leaving behind marks that were still faintly visible. But when he had looked at me with those intense, stormy gray eyes and whispered, "You are my reason for breathing, Elara, my gentle Omega," I had believed him completely. Perhaps that was my first and greatest mistake. As the final bell clanged and his name, Rexus, future beta of Azure Peak, was shouted across the arena, the crowd erupted into a deafening roar. I forced a small, nervous smile, clutching the simple leather-corded moonstone pendant he'd given me. He had promised it meant forever. When he finally turned toward me, his gaze finding mine across the sea of cheering wolves, our mate bond pulsed, a comforting, warm thread tightening between our very souls. My inner wolf stirred, soft and overwhelmingly hopeful. "He's truly ours," she breathed in my mind. But beneath the euphoria of that moment, I noticed something else flickering in his gaze, something cold and calculating that I was not yet able to comprehend. Later that same night, as the celebration fires began to dwindle and the boisterous howls softened into quiet laughter, Rexus found me by the sacred pool. The moon's reflection shimmered on the water's surface, like liquid silver. "You actually did it," I whispered, overwhelmed. "You are the beta now." He stepped closer, his warm breath fanning my cheek. "No, we did it." His fingers traced the simple pendant resting at my throat. "Once my oath is sworn, I'll tell them about us. About our bond." My heart soared, a wild bird taking flight. "You truly mean it?" "Of course." His voice dropped, suddenly intimate and husky. "Do you honestly think I could ever belong to anyone but you?" And in that precise, sacred moment, beneath the full moon's watchful light, with a sense of pine and intoxicating promise thick in the cooling air, I believed him utterly. But even then, the goddess must have been silently watching, patiently knowing exactly what was to come next. Chapter 2. Morning arrived, bringing with it a bright, golden light, but also a rising tide of uneasy whispers. The pack was buzzing with frantic preparations for the Grand Moon Festival, the ceremony where Rexus would take his official oath before the reigning alpha. Every single wolf of Azure Peak would be present. Every eye would be watching, every gaze judging worth. I followed him throughout the training grounds, diligently tending to his minor cuts and ensuring his ceremonial cloak hung perfectly straight. His hands lingered on mine a fraction longer than necessary. "You'll stand near the front, won't you, my love? I need you to witness everything." I managed a genuine smile, though my stomach felt knotted with apprehension. To be truthful, the unease was growing inside me like a spreading frost. For the past few days, the Alpha's aristocratic daughter, Lady Tiana, had been watching us, her gaze sharp, her lips curled in something dangerously close to outright jealousy. She came from the purest, oldest bloodline, the kind that looked at Omegas like me as nothing more than convenient tools, certainly not equals. Yet, Rexus had adamantly told me not to worry. He promised that immediately after his title was confirmed, he would make our mate bond public. "You will be mine under the full moon, Elara. Let them talk. I will silence every single critic." Maybe it was the slight tremble in his tone that morning, or the way his eyes refused to truly meet mine, that made my inner wolf stir with deep foreboding. By dusk, the azure crest courtyard glittered with the light of countless torches. Melodies drifted like fragrant smoke through the air. The Alpha stood tall on the carved stone dais, the pack's crest gleaming mercilessly on his armor. Rexus knelt before him, his head bowed low as the sacred oath began. "Do you, Rexus, swear eternal loyalty to the Alpha, to Azure Peak, and to the moon goddess above all?" "I do." "Do you swear to protect your pack, even if that protection costs you your mate, your life, or your soul?" The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Your mate." He hesitated, just for one fleeting moment. His eyes flickered toward me in the massive crowd, and for one agonizing heartbeat, the bond pulsed between us, aching and intensely alive. Then he looked away. "I swear it," he declared, his voice ringing with renewed conviction. The crowd erupted into an echoing roar, chanting his new title, Beta Rexus. Beta Rexus. But something inside my chest went suddenly and profoundly cold because of that single pause, that one glance, that one monumental lie. When the lavish feast began, Lady Tiana approached him, her smile too sweet and proprietary. She placed a magnificent silver cup into his hand and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Rexus threw his head back and laughed, and in that laugh, I heard the sound of my entire world beginning to break apart. Chapter 3. Night fell, heavy and blindingly bright. The full moon hung impossibly high, a silent, silver witness carved into the dark canvas. I stood numbly among the crowd, my breath trembling, waiting for him to finally fulfill his desperate promise, waiting for him to publicly claim me. Rexus stood beside the Alpha on the dais, his voice strong and clear, his smile sharp as a freshly honed blade. The Alpha raised his hand for silence. Tonight, our new Beta will choose his lifelong mate, the sacred bond that will strengthen Azure Peak for generations to come. Whispers rippled excitedly through the immense crowd. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate, trapped thing. This was it. Rexus turned slowly, his eyes sweeping across the multitude of faces until they finally landed on me. For a brief, terrifying moment, I saw the man I loved, the one who had whispered sacred vows beside the still, sacred pool, the one who had sworn I was his reason for breathing. But then, his expression catastrophically shifted, becoming utterly cold, detached, and brutally calculating. Rexus, he began, his voice amplified and chilling, formally reject the false bond that has regrettably clouded my path. The words instantly froze the air in the hall. I reject Elara, the Omega healer, he declared even louder, each syllable slicing deeper than the last. And the ridiculous illusion of fate that wrongly binds her to me. The hall erupted in horrified gasps. The Alpha's daughter covered her mouth, feigning perfect shock. Wolves turned toward me, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and amusement. No. The word tore itself from my throat, raw and agonizing. Rexus, please. Stop. He didn't even grant me a look. An Omega healer cannot stand beside a Beta leader. The pack requires strength, not pathetic sentimentality. My inner wolf howled, a desperate, shattering sound like breaking glass. Agony shot through my veins, searing every single nerve as the sacred mate bond was brutally torn apart. The moonstone pendant instantly burned hot against my skin before it cracked decisively in two. The world swam and blurred. I dropped heavily to my knees. The pack laughed, whispered, and openly stared. Somewhere in the vast distance, I heard Tiana's voice, sweet and venomous. Perhaps the goddess favors ambition, not such weakness. I tried desperately to stand, but my legs completely failed. My vision swam with uncontrollable tears. Rexus simply turned away, bowing regally to the Alpha as if nothing remotely significant had occurred. The crowd immediately erupted into a renewed, deafening wave of cheers. In that single, devastating moment, something deep inside me withered and died, and something else, entirely new and terrifying, was fiercely born. A silence deeper than any grief. A vow forged in the absolute white-hot fire of betrayal. I remember the wind shifting, carrying my broken scent away, as if trying to brutally erase me from this sacred place. And just like that, I finally understood the truth. The moon doesn't always bless. Sometimes, she is forced to burn. Chapter 4. The night following the rejection was an endless, suffocating void. Every breath I took tasted like bitter ash. Every frantic heartbeat was a jagged, empty echo inside my hollowed chest. The destruction of the mate bond wasn't a clean break. It was a tearing, a raw, primal howl that refused to ever stop. By the time the dawn painted the sky a sickening, angry red, I had lost count of how many tears had already dried and flaked on my cold cheeks. The grand summit still hummed with brazen celebration somewhere behind me. They were toasting his name. They were singing his vile praises. And my name? My name had rapidly become a disgusting curse whispered between drunken, snickering laughs. Did you see her face? The poor, deluded Omega actually thought she mattered. Their cruel laughter followed me like baying hounds. I clutched my threadbare satchel tighter, stuffing the few meager possessions I owned inside. A worn cloak, the cracked halves of my pendant, a single loaf of dry bread. That was the sum total of my life now. As I crossed the courtyard, a small child pointed. "Mama, is that the dirty healer who angered the moon?" Her mother instantly shushed her, pulling her close and away from me. My stomach twisted violently. The moon never made a mistake. I wanted desperately to shout, but my throat completely refused to work. By the time I reached the massive gates, the guards studiously looked away. No one dared stop me, though their profound silence felt heavier than any chains. Behind me, the azure crest banners fluttered, gold wolves on crimson silk, proud, dominant, and utterly merciless. And then the gates slammed shut with a final, echoing groan that sounded far too absolute. The biting wind immediately cut through my thin cloak. Frost stung my cheeks. Yet, even through the numbness, I felt it, a faint, phantom throb where the mate bond had once fiercely burned. A persistent, aching scar. My wolf whined inside me, small and utterly broken. He was never truly ours, I whispered into the cold dawn. He only borrowed our heart. From there, I walked, not toward anywhere specific, but simply away. Away from the pity, away from the humiliation, away from the man who had called me a mistake. Maybe it was fate, or maybe just sheer exhaustion. But by the time the sun climbed weakly above the towering pines, I had reached the wild border, where Azure Peak's perfectly cultivated land gave way to the terrifying, feral sprawl of the Grimwood Forest. They said no wolf ever returned from it, that shadows moved without wind, that the goddess herself forgot the names of those who dared to enter. Still, even a slow death felt kinder than the agony of returning home. I took one final, tearless look at the world I had once loved and stepped resolutely into the suffocating mist. Chapter 5. The forest instantly greeted me like a waiting grave. Every tree trunk was blackened. Every breath was choked with the smell of wet rot and moss. The air pressed down, thick with a menacing silence. Only the soft crunch of my boots and the faint rasp of my desperate breathing dared to disturb it. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. I had completely stopped counting. Gnawing hunger plagued me, but far worse was the cold. It crept beneath my skin until my fingers turned a pale, lifeless blue. Each time I stumbled and fell, I heard echoes, faint laughter, whispers of the Azure Peak wolves haunting my memory. Unfit for a leader, a mistake of scent, their voices blurred with the rustle of dead leaves until I couldn't distinguish which belonged to actual ghosts and which belonged to my own crushing guilt. The deeper I ventured, the stranger the very air became. Shadows moved like living, predatory things. Once, I caught a fleeting glint of watchful eyes between the trees, too low for wolves, too unnaturally bright for men. "Stay back," I warned weakly, though my voice trembled uncontrollably. My claws itched beneath my skin, but the shift wouldn't come. My wolf was too weak, still catastrophically reeling from the broken bond. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me to my knees beside a half-frozen stream. I dipped my hands into the water. It burned like pure ice. My reflection stared back, pale, hollow, and utterly unrecognizable. To be honest, I didn't know who I was without him. And yet, somewhere very deep inside, a tiny spark of defiant light remained. A stubborn, flickering will that absolutely refused to die. That night, I carefully built a small, pathetic fire from fallen branches. The flames crackled weakly, painting the surrounding mist in trembling gold. I pressed the broken halves of my pendant together, whispering a silent prayer. "If the moon still sees me, please show me why I'm still breathing." The wind answered with a sound that was not quite a whisper, not quite a threatening growl. My pulse immediately quickened. I turned toward the impenetrable darkness and froze in place. Something immense was moving through the dense trees. Chapter 6. At first, I convinced myself it was just a cruel trick of the mist, a terrifying shape conjured by exhaustion. But then the very ground trembled, and the scent hit me, metallic iron, fresh blood, and a potent, commanding alpha blood. The creature staggered into the small clearing, the moonlight spilling over its thick, pure white fur. Dark arrows jutted grotesquely from its flank, staining the snow-white coat black with gore. Each shallow breath it took rattled the air with pain. My instincts screamed one urgent command: run. But for some incomprehensible reason, I didn't. Instead, my feet moved toward it, as if the moon goddess herself were pulling me by invisible, silver threads. The massive wolf collapsed with a heavy, sickening thud, its eyes half closed, its breathing barely a whisper. "Easy," I murmured gently. "Easy now." My voice came out soft, barely audible. The sharp scent of his blood flooded my senses. Ancient, potent, terrifyingly powerful. Whoever he was no ordinary alpha. One of the arrows pulsed faintly with dark, sinister runes, poisoned. My healer's instincts instantly took over. I pressed my hand against the jagged wound, channeling every last bit of energy I'd left. Warmth slowly spread from my palm, a faint light seeping into the torn flesh. "Hold on," I desperately murmured. "Don't you dare die here." For a heartbeat, I thought it was completely useless. Then the wolf's golden eyes snapped open. Bright, feral, and piercingly intelligent. They met mine, and something fundamental inside me shifted. The world instantly narrowed to that gaze. Pain, overwhelming strength, and a shocking, immediate recognition. As the wind gusted, his potent scent tangled inextricably with mine, rich cedar and a dominant, coming storm. My heart skipped a beat. My inner wolf, long silent, stirred powerfully. "Mate," she breathed in astonishment. "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "That's impossible." But a bond, faint, fragile, and utterly new, pulsed undeniably. Before I could make any sense of it, the wolf shuddered, its muscles rippling. A soft light spilled across his body, and with a low, agonizing growl, he shifted. Where the beast had fallen now knelt a man, tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, his skin streaked with blood and the pale moonlight. His eyes met mine again, burning with something primal and ancient. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice a low, rough growl. I swallowed hard, torn between overwhelming fear and an incomprehensible awe. "Elara," I whispered. "Just Elara." He looked at the small, glowing mark on my wrist, the faint remnants of my broken mate bond still shimmering there. His expression instantly darkened. "Azure Peak." I flinched. Not anymore. A muscle ticked in his powerful jaw. He studied me for a long, silent moment before his body swayed. His strength was leaving him. I caught him just before he hit the frozen ground. His sheer weight nearly crushed me, but I refused to let go. "Stay with me," I begged softly. "Please." No answer came, only the shallow, ragged breaths. The firelight flickered, painting his handsome face in trembling gold. Even half-conscious, he looked dangerous, wild, like the forest itself had carved him from stone. Without another thought, I tore the sleeve from my cloak and pressed it firmly to his deepest wound, praying it would be enough to hold him until morning. The night stretched on, filled only with the sound of his struggling breathing and the frantic pounding of my own heart. And in the profound quiet that followed, I felt it again, that impossible, irresistible pull. Maybe it was sheer madness. Maybe it was an undeniable fate. But deep down, I knew the ultimate truth. The moon wasn't done with me yet. Chapter 7. The first sound that broke the night's silence was his breathing, ragged, uneven, and utterly animal. The second was the flutter of my own frantic heartbeat, too loud, too human. I had stayed awake the entire night, anxiously watching him. Every time he moved, the firelight caught the curve of his powerful jaw, the sharp angle of his collarbone, the numerous scars that looked carved by warfare itself. He wasn't just incredibly strong, he was ancient. The kind of raw power that made the air around him perpetually hum. When the pale dawn finally crept through the forest canopy, I dared to whisper, "Can you hear my voice?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, his hand shot out with lightning speed, his strong fingers locking around my wrist. I gasped in pain. His grip was powerful enough to bruise, but his skin burned unnervingly cold. Our eyes met, gold to green, alpha to healer. And in that terrifying instant, the world irrevocably shifted. The forest went utterly quiet, as if even the wind was holding its breath in anticipation. His gaze pierced straight through me, not with hostility, but with deep recognition. It was impossible, and yet I felt it, a thread pulling taut between us, a magnetic force. "Who exactly sent you?" His voice was a low growl, rough and unused to any softness. "No one," I managed to stammer. "I simply found you bleeding. You were dying right here." His grip painfully tightened. "Azure Peak. I left them," I said quickly, urgently. "I belong to no one anymore." He studied me for a long time. Then, as if something deep inside him finally relented, he released my wrist and slumped back onto the makeshift bed. I rubbed the tender skin, my heart still racing wildly. "You need to rest." He turned his head, his eyes half-lidded. "You risked yourself to heal me." "Why?" "Because it's what I do," I answered, my voice trembling but my gaze meeting his stare. "Because even broken monsters deserve to live if the moon still allows them to breathe." Something flickered in his expression, a ghost of surprise, or perhaps deep respect. He didn't speak again, but the silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was heavy, charged, and utterly electric. I told myself it was mere exhaustion when my pulse stubbornly refused to calm down. That the warmth blooming in my chest was simply leftover pain from the rejection, not something new and undeniable. But deep down, I already knew the ultimate truth. This was something the old bond could never, ever imitate. This was the terrifying, undeniable beginning of something ancient, something the moon had painstakingly rewritten just for us. Chapter 8. By the time the second night returned, the forest was alive with palpable danger. The sharp scent of rogues drifted menacingly between the trees, feral, desperate, and hungry. They were hunting, and I had a half-dead alpha in my care. "Can you manage to walk?" I whispered. Orion, I had finally learned his name when his fever dream stole his voice, looked up at me through half-closed eyes. "If I have to. Then we move now." We stumbled through the thick darkness, the terrifying forest twisting around us like a malicious maze. Every slight sound made my skin prickle with cold apprehension. Snapping twigs, distant, guttural howls, the whisper of unseen claws on stone. The rogues were rapidly closing in. At last, through the veil of swirling mist, I saw the faint outline of a structure, a crumbling, ancient temple swallowed by thick vines and time. Its immense pillars leaned like weary sentinels, the roof half gone. "This way," I whispered, half dragging him inside. The air inside was freezing cold, but it was at least shelter. Faded, indecipherable runes glowed faintly on the floor, remnants of some ancient, long-forgotten magic. I gently eased him onto a broken stone altar and immediately pressed my hands to his festering wounds. The dark poison fought me, pulsing beneath his skin like black veins. But I didn't stop. My energy poured out like water through a massive crack. "Stop," he rasped weakly. "You'll completely drain yourself." "I've lost enough already," I whispered, tears welling up. "I am not losing you too." His eyes flared gold again, not in anger this time, but in something achingly close to awe. "You don't even know who I am." "Maybe not," I said softly, meeting his intense stare. "But the moon certainly does." The forest outside howled in frustration. The rogues had finally caught our scent. I rose quickly to my feet, clutching a small dagger I'd quietly stolen from Azure Peak's vast armory years ago. "You cannot fight them," he warned, his voice strained. "Watch me try." As the first terrifying shadow crossed the temple threshold, I moved. Raw instinct completely guided me. Not power, not training, just sheer, desperate will. I slashed, ducked, and shoved the small blade straight through the creature's chest. It fell, snarling its last breath. Another one lunged. I barely dodged its razor-sharp claws. And then, before I could strike again, Orion was suddenly there. He moved like a bolt of lightning. Even grievously injured, his strength was absolutely terrifying. His massive claws tore through the rogues in a blinding blur of motion. The temple shook violently with the sickening sound of growls and breaking stone. When the last one finally fell, I realized I was uncontrollably shaking. Blood spattered the altar. The air reeked of iron and ash. Orion turned toward me, his chest heavily heaving. "You should never have stayed here." "Neither should you," I shot back, my voice trembling but firm. He stared at me for a long time. Then slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. "You're incredibly reckless, healer." "Maybe," I said, breathless. "But I'm still alive." Something in his gaze softened. "Because of you, so am I." And just like that, the unbearable tension broke. I laughed, breathless and half in disbelief. He chuckled too, a low, rough sound that made my pulse stutter violently. We sat together in the ruins while the fire burned low. He shared fragments of his past, how a devastating betrayal had nearly cost him his entire pack. How he'd been ambushed by those he trusted most. I told him nothing of my own, only that I'd lost everything once, too. Between us, the silence grew warm instead of cold. As the night deepened, the moonlight slipped through the ceiling cracks and brushed his face. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly safe. Maybe it was fate, or perhaps it was just the moon's mercy. Either way, I wasn't alone anymore. Chapter 9. That night, sleep was fitful and filled with strange dreams. Visions of blinding silver light and wild, untamed forests tangled in my mind, whispering of things not yet written. When I finally woke, the air felt utterly different. Heavy, charged, and overwhelmingly alive. Orion stood just outside the temple entrance, bare-chested, his terrible wounds almost entirely gone. The dawn painted his skin in a magnificent gold and frost. I watched him from the shadows, my heartbeat a loud, traitorous drum in my chest. He turned instantly, as if sensing my presence, and our eyes met again. Something powerful stirred in the air between us, a low hum, a pulse, a call I could not possibly ignore. "What is happening?" I breathed, rising slowly. He didn't answer with words. He only stepped closer, each movement deliberate, magnetic, and utterly mesmerizing. When he reached me, his hand lifted, his fingers gently brushing the broken halves of my pendant. "It wasn't him," he said quietly, his voice a low thrum. "The one who rejected you. The bond you felt, it was never real. The moon only marks a soul once." I froze, completely stunned. "What are you saying to me?" "I'm saying," his voice dropped, raw and absolutely certain, "she has chosen again." Before I could utter another word, before either of us could even draw a breath, the light struck us. It poured through the ruins of the ceiling, silver and intensely alive, wrapping around us both. My body trembled violently as warmth flooded my veins. The scar on my wrist flared, not the broken, old scar of rejection, but a new, burning sigil. The undeniable symbol of the moon's direct blessing. I gasped as Orion cupped my face, his forehead gently pressing against mine. Our wolves held together in the unseen realm, not in sorrow, but in triumphant awakening. "Orion," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. His thumb brushed a single tear from my cheek. "You don't ever have to run again, my Elara." And in that moment, beneath the ancient ruins, beneath the silver moonlight, beneath the crushing weight of every heartbreak I'd ever known, I realized the undeniable truth. I hadn't lost everything. I had been painfully led here, to him, to this destiny, to the bond the moon had written before I was even born. When our lips finally met, it wasn't fire or fury. It was recognition, the kind that instantly sets the soul alight. And somewhere in the profound distance, the forest sighed. The wind carried a whisper I would never forget. The moon never makes mistakes. Chapter 10. When the great gates of Shadow Paw rose before me, I was braced for hostility and aggression. What I found instead was silence, tense, watchful, and intensely alive. Wolves lined the entire mountain pass, their obsidian armor dark as the cliffs they guarded. Above them loomed the massive fortress, carved straight from black stone, its towering spires catching the dying sunlight like deadly daggers. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel their collective judgment before a single word was spoken. To them, I was a mere outsider, a low-born Omega who dared to stand beside their formidable Alpha. Orion's hand gently brushed mine, a brief, grounding touch that spoke louder than any public vow. "They will see what I see," he murmured with absolute certainty. "Or what you want them to see," I whispered back, still unsure. He smiled faintly. "It's the same thing, Elara." The gates creaked open, revealing a vast courtyard ringed with high ceremonial fires. Every wolf instantly knelt as we passed, their heads bowed low, not out of warmth, but out of deeply ingrained respect laced with fear. At the far end, the elder council of Shadow Paw waited. Their leader, an ancient, fierce she-wolf named Gia, stepped forward. Her silver hair gleamed in the firelight, her eyes sharp as chipped glass. "An Omega from Azure Peak?" she asked, her voice steady but chillingly cold. "Our new Luna?" "Yes," Orion stated simply, his voice commanding. A low murmur rippled through the assembled wolves like thunder. Gia's gaze then shifted entirely to me. "You healed our Alpha. You saved his life. That is honor enough. But a Luna's crown is no mere gift. It is earned only by the Pack's unwavering faith." I met her eyes without flinching. "Then allow me to earn it." The courtyard went absolutely still. Even Orion's breath caught in his throat. I stepped forward, kneeling before the central altar stone. "If the moon truly called me here," I declared, "then she will prove it to all of you." Gia tilted her head, clearly curious. "How, Omega?" "By light," I said softly. Without waiting for permission, I lifted my open palm. The new mark on my wrist began to glow, brilliant silver and intensely strong. The exact same light flared on Orion's powerful chest, where the moon's sigil now rested over his heart. The air hummed, a low, divine chord, until even the most skeptical wolves lowered their heads in submission. Gia bowed first, deep and low. Then, "It is the moon's undeniable will." One by one, the entire pack followed her lead. Knees touched the ground, voices murmuring in unison. "Luna of Shadow Paw. Our Luna." My throat tightened with emotion. I had once been violently cast out by cruel laughter. Now, I was crowned by respectful silence. As the ceremonial fires roared higher, Orion's strong hand found mine again. "You walked into our dark world alone," he said quietly, his eyes full of pride. "Now you walk as its very heart." Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the moon's way of reminding me that broken things could still shine brighter than gold. Chapter 11. The months that followed felt like an impossible dream stitched together entirely by hope. For the first time in my chaotic life, I was not afraid to completely belong. Shadow Paw was a land of beautiful contradictions, brutal yet fiercely loyal, cold yet intensely protective. Its wolves lived by strength, but they cherished absolute truth above all power. And so, though whispers occasionally followed me, they never once touched me with scorn. Orion's fierce presence made sure of that. He was everywhere, in every tense council meeting, on every training field, and every blessed night spent beside me beneath the carved stone ceiling of our chamber. His warmth was a constant, steady anchor, reliable as the beat of his heart beneath my cheek. But the moon had grander plans. One morning, as the first gentle snow began to fall, I felt the ultimate shift, a faint flutter beneath my ribs, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Then, astonishingly, another one. I wept uncontrollably before I even told him. When Orion finally heard the news, he went utterly still. Shock first, then overwhelming wonder, then a reverent smile that melted even the icy mountain air. "Twins," he whispered, his palm gently laid across my stomach. "The moon doubles what she blesses." He wanted to instantly tell the world. I begged him not to. "Not yet," I pleaded. "Let them be safe a little longer, just for us." So, the pregnancy became our beautiful secret. Only Gia knew, tending to me with quiet wisdom and ancient herbs. 2 hearts, she said one night, her eyes glinting knowingly. 2 paths. One born of pure peace, one of divine fire. The moon plays a very long game, Luna. When the ominous lunar eclipse came, I felt the first violent pains. The entire fortress was silent. All of Shadow Paw gathered outside in solemn prayer, completely unaware that their Luna was bleeding in the sacred chamber. Orion never once left my side. His hand was my anchor, his voice the only thread connecting me to this world. Hours passed. The moon turned a terrifying crimson. And then 2 loud cries pierced the profound night. Twins. 2 sons. One with soft, calm eyes like mine, gentle green. The other with eyes of pure alpha gold. On their small wrists shimmered twin marks, one the sigil of Shadow Paw, the other the faint, old crest of Azure Peak. I held them close, tears streaming down my face. "The world will not understand you," I whispered to them. "But the moon always will." Orion kissed my brow, his eyes shining with pride. They are the undeniable proof of what they all fear, that peace is truly possible. He was right. And because of that, I also knew that peace would never, ever come easily. Chapter 12. Peace never manages to last long in a world built entirely on arrogant pride. By the time the twins were strong enough to walk, dangerous rumors had already crossed the guarded borders. Azure Peak spies spoke darkly of a rogue healer who had magically bewitched an alpha, using foul witchcraft to bear his illegitimate heirs. Rexus's vile lies, no doubt. His words were spreading like a sickness, corrupting even neutral packs. One morning, Orion violently threw a crumpled scroll across the council table. "He calls you a traitor," he snarled, his eyes blazing. "He claims you seduced me to unite the packs through deceit and sorcery." I stared at the parchment, the wax seal of Azure Peak still maddeningly fresh. Let him talk. His words are dust. He slammed his powerful palm on the table. "You think I will just let him insult my Luna and my sons?" "Insults are merely wind, Orion," I said quietly, remaining calm. "Let the moon decide which truth actually stands on solid ground." His anger softened slightly into something else. Fear. "They won't stop at mere words, Elara. He knows what you truly mean to me. He will use it to break you again." "Then let him try his absolute worst," I said, though my heart ached with familiar dread. The moon brought me this far. She won't allow me to fall now. Still, that night, when the ceremonial fires dimmed and the children slept soundly between us, I lay wide awake. The lingering scent of smoke and pine clung to my skin. I traced the marks on their tiny wrists, one from each pack, 2 paths, one profound peace. And yet, in the chilling wind outside, I swore I could hear Rexus's name whispered by menacing shadows. The moonlight spilled through the window, bathing us all in silver. Orion stirred beside me, sensing my sudden unease. "You're thinking too much again." "I'm remembering," I murmured. "How I once tragically thought rejection was the end of me." He gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. "It was only the beginning." His words sank into me like warmth against the growing frost. Still, deep down I felt it a palpable shift. The unsettling calm before a massive storm. The world was stirring, and the moon, she was patiently watching us all. Chapter 13. The morning it arrived, the mountain was completely wrapped in thick, suffocating fog, a silent warning the moon herself seemed to whisper. The messenger arrived trembling in the courtyard, holding a scroll tightly bound in gold ribbon and red wax, Azure Peak's infamous colors. My pulse momentarily faltered the instant I saw that familiar crest. Years had passed, yet the sight of it still burned like salt in an open wound. I took the sealed letter with deliberately steady hands. Orion's potent scent lingered right behind me, cedar, steel, and overwhelming concern. He said absolutely nothing as I broke the seal. The words were carved with Rexus's signature arrogance. "To Luna Elara of Shadow Paw, You are cordially invited to the mating ceremony of Beta Rexus and Lady Tiana of Azure Peak. This union shall be blessed by the moon and solemnly witnessed by all the great packs. And at the very bottom, in his bold, familiar script, the same sharp, confident handwriting I had once loved, was a single, chilling line. It would please me if you attended, to show there is no ill blood between us. My fingers trembled uncontrollably. No ill blood. He had shattered my bond, stripped me of my name and dignity, sent me into exile, and now he wanted me to stand in the crowd and smile politely while he claimed his actual prize. I laughed, a soft, bitter, disbelieving sound. He wants peace, I murmured. But only if it's on a stage and at my expense. Orion's immediate growl was primal and terrifying. You will absolutely not go. His tone carried the sheer weight of command, alpha power that could make even the air submit. Yet beneath it I heard something else, fear. He plans to humiliate you again, Elara. This letter is pure poison wrapped in gold. Maybe, I whispered, tracing the cold wax seal. Or maybe it's the moon's final call to me. He stepped closer, his hand firmly grasping my shoulder. You owe him nothing, Elara. I owe myself closure, I countered, meeting his gaze. For a moment, neither of us breathed a word. Then, Orion exhaled a low, resigned sound. If you go, I go with you. I met his gaze, gold and fire, protective and utterly unyielding. No, I said softly, my voice firm. This is a ghost I must face completely alone. Even so, I knew he would never truly allow me to walk into the lion's den without his powerful shadow guarding my steps. By the time the thick fog lifted that morning, the final decision was already carved deeply into fate. Chapter 14. The council chamber crackled with electric tension. Gia's voice, sharp as chipped flint, cut through the silence. You would deliberately walk back into Azure Peak? Into the den of the very wolf who publicly damned you. I would walk into my past, I said evenly, holding my ground, and show it that it can no longer touch me. The skeptical elders murmured quietly among themselves. Some called it ultimate bravery, others sheer madness. Orion stood tall at the head of the table, his powerful jaw set in stone. This is not a simple gathering, Elara, he warned, his voice low. Rexus will have meticulously planned every word, every subtle whisper. He wants to drag your name back, through the mud one last time. Then let him try, I said, meeting his intense eyes. His eyes immediately blazed with fury. You honestly think I can watch you be mocked again? I rose slowly from my seat, stepping closer until the space between us vibrated with raw power and familiar pain. You won't be watching. You will be waiting. And when I return, the world will finally see who truly kneels before the moon. The room instantly fell silent. Even the torches seemed to flicker with awe. Gia offered a faint, approving smile. You speak more like a queen than a Luna, child. Queens are crowned by mortal men, I stated firmly. Lunas are personally chosen by the moon. Later, when the chamber had emptied, Orion gently cornered me by the high balcony. The night wind tangled my hair, carrying the cool scent of pine and frost. Say it plainly for me, he murmured, his voice urgent. You still hate him, don't you? Maybe once, I admitted, looking out at the endless mountain view. But hate only ties you to what broke you. I cut that chain a very long time ago, my love. He brushed his powerful fingers against my jaw, tracing the new mark beneath my skin. Then promise me one sacred thing. What is it? That you'll come back to me, Elara. The way he said it, soft, fierce, and utterly raw, made my chest ache. Always, I whispered, taking his hand. I will walk with the moon at my back, Orion. He leaned in, his lips brushing my temple. And I will ensure my shadow guards every one of your steps. That night, as I prepared for the long journey, I caught my reflection in the polished mirror. The same face that had once swept brokenly in Azure Peak Square was now framed by a magnificent Luna's crown of silver and moonstone. The fragile girl they had tried to destroy was gone. The formidable woman who would return was a legend waiting to be written in stone. Chapter 15. Dawn bled a pale gold across the horizon as we rode out from Shadow Paw. The winding road stretched like a deep scar between frozen peaks, the mist curling around the hooves of our horses. Behind me trailed my personal guard, silent, deadly, and fiercely loyal. But beside me rode my sons, now 12 years old, tall and proud, their eyes gleaming with the twin light. One gold, one green. They didn't yet fully understand why I brought them along, only that destiny was calling us toward a place I had sworn never to see again. The closer we drew to Azure Peak, the stronger and more familiar the scent of its forest grew. Pine, smoke, and iron. Memories followed us like ghosts. Laughter turned to scorn. Vows turned to devastating lies. At the official border, I dismounted slowly. The wind was colder here, the ground too familiar. My fingers brushed the faint scar on my wrist, the mark of rejection long since burned away by the moon's potent blessing. "Mother," my eldest son asked, his voice low and serious. "Are you afraid now?" I offered a faint smile. "No, my love. Just remembering what fear used to feel like." We entered the territory beneath the brilliant rising sun. Wolves stopped their work to openly stare. Some quickly bowed, confused by the royal sigil on our Shadow Paw banners. Others whispered my name as if speaking to a terrifying ghost. The guards at the grand gate hesitated, recognition flickering in their eyes. "You," one stammered, utterly stunned. "I am Luna Elara of Shadow Paw," I said, my voice commanding. "Announce me to your alpha." They scrambled to obey. The courtyard rapidly filled with anxious murmurs as I walked forward, draped in a magnificent gown of silver and midnight, its hem intricately embroidered with the twin sigils of both packs. The twins flanked me like living, moonlit mirrors, their presence commanding even among their seasoned warriors. And above it all, the banners of Azure Peak fluttered, the same gold and crimson I had once fled under a blood-red dawn. The sound of music drifted from the great hall, laughter, tinkling crystal, lies wrapped in a grand celebration. My heart beat steady and calm. Each step echoed like a rising prophecy. At the massive threshold, I paused momentarily. For one fleeting second, I smelled him. Rexus. Same expensive cologne, same arrogance, sweetened now with false triumph. "Ready, mother?" my younger son asked, his voice firm. I smiled. "More than I've ever been." The guards pushed the immense doors open. Light and noise burst outward. Gasps immediately followed as every face turned toward us. Nobles, warriors, even the regional alphas. And at the far end of the grand hall, beneath massive chandeliers carved with moonstone, stood Rexus, resplendent in gold, his arm possessively wrapped around Lady Tiana, the Alpha's daughter. The music faltered and died. His triumphant smile faltered too, replaced by shock, because the woman he had once called a mistake of scent now stood before him in blinding silver light, not broken, not begging, but burning with the calm, steady fire of destiny completely fulfilled. And beside her, the two powerful sons whose eyes gleamed with the intense power of future alphas. Whispers rippled through the stunned hall. "Is that the rejected Omega?" "Impossible." I stepped forward, every movement deliberate, graceful, and utterly lethal. "Beta Rexus," I said softly, my voice carrying like a blade through the suddenly still air. "You invited me." He froze in place. And just like that, the balance of power shifted completely. Chapter 16. The grand hall shimmered with sickening decadence, chandeliers dripping with crystal, banners painted in blood and gold, and laughter that rang too loud, too utterly false. Azure Peak had always tragically worshipped appearances, and tonight was its gilded altar. At the very center of it all stood Rexus, the very wolf who had once called me a mistake, now basking in the thunderous applause of his peers. He looked every inch the perfect beta, tall, impossibly regal, with eyes that could charm and cut in equal measure. His smile glittered like the wine in his goblet, hollow and sharply edged. Loyalty, he declared to the assembled wolves, raising his glass high. That is the true foundation of any pack, of any sacred bond. He paused dramatically. And tonight, his gaze swept the crowd with practiced arrogance. We celebrate the bond that unites Azure Peak and the Alpha's noble bloodline. Cheers erupted. Applause thundered through the hall. He basked in it like basking in warm sunlight, but beneath the surface, I could clearly see the cracks beginning to show because the moon above burned too brightly. Through the enormous high windows, its glow fell like blinding silver fire, painting every surface in an unnatural, restless light. The air shimmered, alive with a strange energy. Even the guests began to murmur nervously. "Strange night for ceremony," someone whispered nearby. "The moon has never shone like that before." Tiana, his fragile bride, clung possessively to his arm, radiant in her golden gown. Yet, her smile was stiff and deeply uncertain. "Rexus," she murmured, her voice laced with worry. "Why is everyone looking up at the sky?" He brushed her concern away with the same arrogant ease I remembered all too well. "Because the moon favors us tonight, my love," he said, forcing a grin. But I could clearly see it, the faint tremor in his powerful jaw. The moon wasn't favoring him. She was silently waiting. Chapter 17. It happened at the precise height of the music. The violins soared to a frantic crescendo. The crowd raised their glasses in salute. And then, the great, reinforced doors burst open again. The deafening sound instantly silenced everything: laughter, music, even the ability to breathe. Frigid air swept in from the courtyard, carrying the distinct scent of pine, smoke, and raw, untamed power. And there I stood, draped in silver and midnight, the lunar crest of Shadow Paw gleaming at my throat. My two sons flanked me perfectly, twin mirrors of strength and calm, their unique eyes glinting intensely under the silver moonlight. One green like mine, the other gold like Orion's. The very guards who had once turned me away now stumbled backward, their heads bowing instinctively out of sheer terror. I stepped across the cold threshold. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a lone heartbeat echoing through eternity. Gasps rippled across the grand hall. Whispers followed like a quickly rising tide. "Is that the rejected one? Impossible. She's too powerful." At the far end, Rexus froze entirely. The color drained completely from his face, replaced by utter disbelief, and then something much uglier. Pure fear. "Luna Elara, Veil of Shadow Paw," I said, my voice steady and low, yet somehow carrying to every remote corner of the vast hall. "You invited me, Beta Rexus. So, I came, just as requested." Tiana's hand slipped immediately from his arm. "Who is she, Rexus?" "Who?" He stammered, unable to speak. "No one, a former acquaintance, the peasant." I smiled slowly, a sharp, deliberate expression. "Is that what we're calling mates these days?" The crowd gasped audibly. Tiana recoiled in shock. Mates. Rexus's perfect facade catastrophically cracked, desperation flickering wildly in his eyes. "That was years ago. It meant nothing." "Yes," I interrupted, my tone silken but deadly lethal. "Years ago, when you stood beneath this very same moon and publicly rejected me before your entire pack. You called me a mistake of scent. You used me to climb your way right here." Every single eye in the hall turned toward him. Even the mighty Alpha of Azure Peak shifted uneasily on his gilded throne. "And yet," I continued, taking another slow step forward, "the moon does not make mistakes." My twin sons moved perfectly beside me, each raising their pendant, one engraved with the Shadow Paw crest, the other with the moon's sigil flawlessly intertwined with the azure crest. The entire room seemed to suddenly glow brighter. The whispers instantly became shouts of realization. "Those boys. They bear the mark of both bloodlines. Impossible. He is the father." Rexus's breath hitched in his throat. "You dare bring your bastards into my sacred hall." "Bastards?" My voice sliced through his words like razor-sharp frost. "These are the beloved sons of Alpha Orion Vale, my true fated mate, born beneath the moon's direct blessing. The moonlight immediately flared, spilling across the hall until even the grand chandeliers dimmed completely. Every single wolf in the room instantly dropped to one knee, not by choice, but by uncontrollable instinct. The moon was now speaking, and she was speaking through me. Chapter 18. It was no longer just my voice that filled the immense hall. It was something far older, much colder. The terrifying sound of absolute truth made flesh. The bond you broke was never truly yours to claim, I said, my eyes locked relentlessly on Rexus. You twisted the moon's sacred gift for your naked ambition. You turned love into mere currency. You called loyalty a despicable leash. He stumbled backward violently, sweat beading on his temple. I only did what was necessary for the pack's future. For yourself, I corrected him, utterly calm. You used me to climb the ladder of power, and in doing so, you have catastrophically cursed your own bloodline and your life. A deep, commanding howl echoed from just outside, resonant, ancient, and utterly commanding. The doors opened again. Orion stepped inside. The room instantly erupted into utter chaos. Alphas rose to their feet. Guards frantically drew their weapons. But no one moved further when he spoke. Sit, he commanded. His voice rolled through the hall like thunder itself. Every wolf immediately obeyed. He crossed the floor, his fierce gaze fixed entirely on Rexus. You once tried to destroy her. You nearly killed me with your cowardly treachery. And yet, here she stands. My Luna. My ultimate salvation. Orion's hand gently brushed mine, a small gesture, yet devastatingly intimate and powerful. The moon has already justly judged you, Rexus, he said, his voice cold and final. But your pack deserves to clearly see what justice truly looks like. A beam of pure light broke through the skylight, blinding, silver, and intensely sacred. It struck the marble floor between us, forming the perfect, unmistakable sigil of the moon. Rexus fell to his knees, trembling uncontrollably. Please, Alpha. I thought she was unworthy. I was told she was an Omega, he cried out. And yet she stands above you now, I said quietly, without malice. Because worth is never granted by mere title. It is only revealed by pure truth. Tiana finally turned fully away from him, tears streaming down her carefully painted face. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice broken. You lied to all of us and the goddess. The hall erupted in furious murmurs, betrayal, disgust, disbelief. The Alpha of Azure Peak, Theron, rose slowly. Beta Rexus, he said coldly, his voice heavy with finality. You are immediately stripped of rank and honor. The moons will have spoken clearly. Rexus's agonizing sobs broke the ensuing silence. I looked down at him, not with hatred, but with something far deeper. Profound pity. The bond you foolishly broke will now haunt you, Rexus, I whispered, turning away. Not because you lost me, but because you never, ever deserved me in the first place. When I turned to leave, the moonlight followed me. My sons stepped beside me, their small hands finding mine. And for the first time since my terrible rejection, the moon above Azure Peak shone not with fury, but with undeniable peace. Chapter 19. The hall no longer possessed any of its former glitter. The chandeliers dimmed completely, and the gilded banners that once screamed of triumph now hung heavy and lifeless under the moon's cold, absolute stare. Rexus knelt in the desolate center of it all, stripped of his confidence, his voice, and every last shred of his dignity. His golden coat of honor had been viciously torn from his shoulders, lying crumpled beside him like the corpse of a luxurious life he had stolen and thrown away. Around him, the powerful council of Alphas gathered, the great leaders of the northern territories, now seated in a wide crescent beneath the moon's sigil. Their gazes burned hotter than the torches. Alpha Orion stood directly beside me, his presence a wall of calm, controlled fury. I could feel the faint tremor of his extreme restraint through our mate bond. He would have gladly torn Rexus apart if not for the sacred ritual that demanded judgment through word, not claw. The presiding voice of the council, Alpha Theron of Azure Peak, Tiana's father, rose above the tense murmurs. Beta Rexus, he began, his voice booming. You stand justly accused of betraying not only your Luna's sacred bond, but the will of the moon goddess herself. Your selfish ambition has brought deep shame upon our entire kind. Rexus's voice cracked painfully. I did it for the pack. For Azure Peak's strength. Theron's expression hardened like stone. You broke a fated bond to chase mere power. You conspired against Shadow Paw's Alpha and plotted his death. And now your entire web of lies has been burned away beneath the moonlight. Another Alpha, Gia of Shadow Paw, the elder who had once doubted me, stepped forward. I saw the light with my own eyes, she declared, her voice firm. The moon marked her and absolutely condemned him. No wolf can fake that blessing. No mortal hand can forge such undeniable truth. The room buzzed with fresh whispers, words like traitor, liar, blasphemer. I said nothing at all. I didn't need to. My absolute silence spoke louder than his pathetic pleas. Rexus finally turned toward me, desperation hollowing his eyes. Elara, please. Tell them I'm not truly evil. Tell them I lost my way. I met his desperate gaze without flinching. You didn't lose your way, Rexus. You willingly sold it. His breath hitched. Theron's voice boomed again, final and absolute. By the supreme authority of the Alpha's Council, you are hereby stripped of all title and territory. You are permanently exiled from Azure Peak lands, never again to bear the mark of leadership or command. Gasps, cries, and then a profound silence. The guards stepped forward. Chains of dull silver clinked as they bound his wrists. Rexus looked up at me, trembling violently. Please, Elara, don't let them do this to me. But I turned away completely. Justice had already spoken its final word. Chapter 20. The ceremony of condemnation should have reached its painful end there, but fate was not yet done with him. Tiana slowly rose from her throne, her golden gown dragging behind her like sunlight turning to lifeless ash. Her eyes, once filled with cold admiration for Rexus, now burned fiercely with betrayal. Beta Rexus, she said, her voice clear and terrifyingly sharp. You courted me with blatant falsehoods. You promised me loyalty, devotion, and supreme honor. Yet all I see standing before me is a pathetic coward who desperately hides behind weak excuses. He tried weakly to reach for her. Tiana, please, my love. She stepped back instantly, pure revulsion twisting her features. You called her a mistake. You used her. And for what, Rexus? To gain my father's approval, only? He stammered, unable to form a coherent thought. I thought I could learn to love you, Tiana. Love. Her voice rose, trembling with pure, unadulterated fury. You don't know how to love. You only know how to consume. And when there's nothing left, you simply move on to your next victim. Her hand went immediately to her neck, where the mating mark still glowed faintly, proof of the bond they had just sealed. She pressed her palm firmly to it, and with a sharp, agonizing breath, she tore it away, a sudden flash of blood and intense light. The entire room gasped in unison. The mark instantly vanished, seared into complete nothingness. I reject you, she declared, her voice shaking but not breaking. Not as a mate, not as a beta, not as anything at all. Rexus finally crumpled. His knees hit the cold marble floor with a hollow thud. Tiana, please. Don't leave me completely alone. You made that ultimate choice years ago, Rexus, she whispered, her voice filled with finality. The guards moved closer, but he ignored them completely. His eyes desperately sought mine again. Wild, broken, and filled with a desperate plea. Elara, please. You were always kind to me. Forgive me for what I did. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. I saw faint flashes. The night he'd held me under the stars, the warmth of his hand, the sweetness of the lies that once tasted like forever. And then I vividly remembered the moment he let go. My voice was soft but absolutely final. Kindness is not a weakness, Rexus. But forgiveness is earned, not begged for. His head bowed, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably. And for the very first time, I realized that what I felt for him was not hatred. It was simply release. Chapter 21. The hall finally emptied, one wolf at a time, until only the condemned remained. Rexus was still on his knees. I was standing tall in the pale silver glow, and the full moon was above us, watchful and utterly silent. It was quiet enough that I could clearly hear his ragged breath hitch, the faint scrape of the silver chains against the cold marble. When I looked at him, I saw not the powerful man who had completely ruined me, but the painful lesson he had ultimately become. He weakly lifted his head. "Why?" he whispered, his voice thin and broken. "Why would the moon give you absolutely everything and leave me with nothing at all?" I stepped closer, the long hem of my gown whispering across the floor. "Because the moon never makes mistakes, Rexus." His eyes filled with hot tears, the very last of a pride that had finally drowned itself in his own betrayal. The guards began to drag him slowly toward the massive gates. The great doors opened, revealing the cold, dark expanse of the wilderness he had once mocked me for fleeing into. He looked back one last, desperate time. I did not. As he finally vanished into the impenetrable darkness, a brilliant beam of light broke through the skylight, bathing me entirely in silver fire. The chains of my past, unseen but always present, melted away instantly in that light. I closed my eyes, feeling the moon hum, not in words, but in pure feeling. Peace. Justice. Closure. Orion appeared instantly beside me, his hand warm and strong around mine. "It's finally over, my Elara," he said, his voice deep with relief. I shook my head slowly. "No," I whispered, opening my eyes. "It's only the beginning." Because the entire world had just witnessed what true power really was. Not vengeance, but grace. And grace, once awakened, never truly dies. The moonlight deepened until the hall shimmered like pure water, and the whispers of every single pack carried one unifying truth into the night. The Omega he rejected became the Luna, crowned by the moon goddess herself. Chapter 22. The ride home felt profoundly different this time. The treacherous road that had once carried my broken, exiled body through the grimwood forest now welcomed me back in absolute triumph. Mist drifted low across the path, glowing faintly under the moon's silver hue, as though the forest itself bowed in quiet, powerful respect. Orion rode closely beside me, his hand brushing mine every so often, wordless, yet full of deep meaning. Behind us, our sons rode tall and proud, their joyful laughter spilling through the trees like pure sunlight after a long, devastating storm. When Shadow Paw's gates finally appeared through the heavy fog, the guards didn't just bow, they howled. One by one, wolves rapidly filled the vast courtyard, their voices rising into the night until the mountain itself seemed to echo our triumphant return. "Luna Elara. Our Luna has come home," they cried. I dismounted slowly, the comforting weight of everything, grief, victory, and endless love, settling into my bones like hard-earned peace. Gia stepped forward, tears gleaming in her fierce eyes. "The moon was right about you all along, child," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You were never meant to bow to any alpha. You were meant to walk beside one." I smiled faintly. "Beside, yes," I teased gently, "but sometimes slightly ahead when he's too stubborn to listen to reason." Orion chuckled softly under his breath, his powerful arm sliding securely around my waist. "She's not wrong, you know," he murmured into my ear. That night, we stood on the balcony, overlooking the vast valley. Below, countless fires burned bright, celebration fires that permanently chased away the old shadows. Trade emissaries from Azure Peak had already begun to arrive, hesitant, but clearly hopeful. Even Alpha Theron himself sent a respectful word. Peace begins with your name, Luna. The past, once jagged as dangerous glass, now felt smooth in my palms. I had carried the scars long enough to finally see how beautifully they caught the light. Orion's voice broke the comfortable silence. Do you truly regret returning to face him? I turned to him, leaning into his strength.
No.
I think the moon needed me to walk through the fire one last time to fully learn that mercy burns much brighter than mere revenge. He pressed his forehead to mine. And what now, my magnificent Luna? Now, I said softly, looking out at the United Lands. We build a world where no Omega ever has to run again. Chapter 23. 5 years passed swiftly, and the world had dramatically changed. The Alpha Summit, once a council plagued by petty rivalry and arrogant pride, now stood beneath banners of silver and black, the sigils of Shadow Paw and Azure Crest intricately intertwined. When I entered the great hall, the room instantly fell into a reverent silence. Not fear, not raw awe, but something much gentler, deep respect. The chair at the head of the table, once strictly reserved for the eldest Alpha, was respectfully offered to me instead. Theron himself rose, bowing low to me. Luna Elara Vale, he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. You have accomplished what centuries of bloodshed tragically could not. You united us through sheer grace, not brute conquest. My sons sat behind me, strong and noble young men now, each carrying a perfect piece of both their parents within them. When I looked at them, I saw the moon's ultimate promise completely fulfilled. Peace, I said, my voice resonating through the hall, is not the absence of strength. It is the absolute mastery of it. It's choosing deep compassion when power tempts us otherwise. Gia nodded slowly. The rejected Luna who healed the world. She whispered, and the words rippled through the hall until they became a unified chant. Luna Elara Vale, healer of Pax, chosen of the moon. Music rose in celebration. The crowd lifted their heads in respect. I felt tears gather, not from sorrow, but from a profound gratitude. When the summit ended, Orion found me alone by the window, staring out at the endless stretch of unified land that was once brutally divided by hate. Now, trade roads connected them like living veins through a single, healthy body. He slipped his arms around me, his chin resting gently on my shoulder. They'll write your name in all the history books, you know. Then I hope, I said quietly, leaning into his warmth, they remember the woman, not just the legend. He smiled against my skin. I'll remind them every single day. Chapter 24. Years later, on a quiet, peaceful night, I found myself standing once again beneath the very same moon that had watched me fall and ultimately rise. The air smelled of clean rain and wild lavender. The world had gone still, as if waiting for something profoundly sacred. From the highest cliffs beyond Shadow Paw, I could clearly see the faint lights of Azure Peak glowing peacefully in the distance. Once, that sight had burned like salt in a terrible wound. Now it felt like a harmonious song, soft, distant, but perfectly in tune. Somewhere out there, I knew Rexus lived, exiled, broken, but still alive. And sometimes, when the wind carried the faint sound of wolves howling, I wondered if he still paused to listen. That night, the moonlight shimmered brighter than usual. A whisper brushed my deepest thoughts, gentle, maternal, and infinitely vast. You have successfully fulfilled the circle, my child. I closed my eyes, feeling grateful tears slip down my cheeks. Thank you, Lyra, I whispered to the goddess, for turning my utter heartbreak into my ultimate destiny. Behind me, Orion appeared silently, immediately wrapping me securely in his arms. Talking to the moon again, my love? She listens better than you do sometimes, I teased, resting my head back against his shoulder. He laughed softly, his breath warm against my neck. Then tell her this. She can keep her destiny. You are mine, Elara. The twins, our sons, emerged from the path below, laughing loudly as they chased each other in their powerful wolf forms, silver fur flashing beautifully under the night sky. I smiled widely through my tears. Ours, I whispered, looking at Orion. Always ours. The moon dipped lower, its intense light spilling over us like a final, beautiful benediction. And as I stood there, Alpha's mate, revered healer, proud mother, respected Luna, living legend, I finally understood the truth that had taken me years of pain to find. The moon never truly punishes. She only transforms. Because every heartbreak, every profound wound, every brutal rejection was never meant to fully end me. It was only meant to profoundly remake me. And in that moment, beneath her eternal light, I finally felt whole. If you loved this tale of a broken Omega rising to become a powerful Luna, don't forget to smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe for more epic wolf shifter stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss any story. And kindly rate the story from 1 to 10. See you in the next one.